Welcome to SAM Conversation, a program of South Asia Monitor. Program today is on space in future warfare. It is our pleasure to welcome Lieutenant General P.S. Pannu, retired Senior Advisor to Space Industries Association. General Pannu, in a previous program of yours, which I saw, I remember you mentioned how Saurabh Kalia, during the Kargil confrontation in 1999, how then young Saurabh Kalia went on a patrol, a recce patrol, a reconnaissance patrol, and how he was very badly captured and very badly mangled by the Pakistanis. And how we have now reached a stage of how we made progress, that whatever Saurabh Kalia went to reconnoiter becomes readily available on screens in any bunker, operations room, or out in the open, wherever our troops happen to be. Also, there was the confrontation with the Chinese PLA at Galwan in 2020. That was another case of, if we had been able to get previous intelligence about the movements of the PLA, it would have helped a lot. Please bring us up to date with whatever has been done.
Thank you, Col Anil Bhat, for getting me over to speak on a very important subject, that is military space. Actually, space is not meant for military or civil. Space is a resource which can be used both by civil and military. It is a God's eye that if you, in the military parlance, understand the relevance of high ground, space is the ultimate high ground. And it means whatever you can see and whatever you can communicate with through the space, you will be able to influence that area. And the area that the space can influence is very, very vast. So from tactical to strategic applications in the Earth observation, that you can look at the Earth is extremely important. And if you can look at the Earth, you can also look at the other satellites. So therefore, looking capability on the Earth, around the Earth, into the orbital platforms which are operating in the space, and even looking at the celestial objects is what the observation can give you. It is how your senses are, how sensitive your resolution is, that will give you that kind of a persistent surveillance. From the military parlance, obviously, you want to have land warfare benefit out of the space communications, space navigation, and space observation. So these are the three things which are called triad: the Earth observation, the navigation ability, and communication. And communication actually weds both Earth observation and the navigation, both. So loosely, when I call observation in the military parlance, it becomes the ISR, the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. You do it in the opposite sequence. First, you continue to reconnaissance, reconnoiter the area. And if you find that there is some information of military significance, then you start keeping those areas under surveillance. And once you start finding data and meaning out of what objects you've kept under surveillance, you start working on the information and intelligence of those areas. So once you have the intelligence, now you are ready for anything. Now all this, whatever you gather from the space, has to be communicated. And you can only communicate it down if you have good, secure communications without any latency, and the kind of information which is available from the satellites is so much that you need very high throughput satellites. So therefore, ISR through communication becomes one facet of the military space assets that a country can have. Once you've done that, now if you want to have an information about a particular place, you do not know what is the lat long of that area. And being a military officer, you would know that if you don't know the exact map reference or the exact location on ground, you have to have the grid reference, so which is lat long. So once you have a lat long, you will be able to track from one spot to another what is the movement time, what is the direction, and what is the predictable path that that movement is likely to take place. So the predictive intelligence can be built up through that. So therefore, the ISR, the communications, and the PNT, which is the navigation, because PNT is place, navigation, and timing. Where it was, where it went, and when did it go. And therefore, these 3-4 attributes that I'm talking about builds it into a triad, and triad is extremely important. Now you give a reference point of Kargil. There was some information which was received manually by those graziers who went up after the winter session got over. The military had actually vacated certain posts, and they went up because the graziers keep going up, and when they went up, they realized that all is not well. There are some strange looking people there, which was a manual intelligence, and that was also not military intelligence, which had to be then converted into a military intelligence by sending out a military reconnaissance patrol, which was headed by Saurabh Kalia. The number of days he was kept in enemy custody left a huge doubt as to where he went, whether he got lost or whether he actually got captured, and ultimately through communication, which was sent out through the civilians, they said you can come and take his body, which was completely mutilated and eyes gouged out. At that tender age in 20s, a youngster went up because if he had technology, he would have carried the communication with him, and he would have very quickly given out the manual assessment of that area if that was covered by the satellite communication. Secondly, he would have already got the satellite maps available with him to know that there is something strange which has happened. Depending on the resolution, if the resolution is not very high, then it will give you some terrain configurations or some bunkers. But if the resolution is so much better, then it can even tell you that there is a human presence there. So it is again the story of resolution through Earth observation and the ISR. And if we had done that, if we had the PNT linked up in the triad, you could have actually eliminated that kind of infiltration through a smart equipment by targeting them smartly. Exact spot could have been targeted through smart ammunition used through artillery guns or through missiles. And none of that, what we went through during Kargil, would have been the sequence in which the manual infantry operations had to be undertaken, devoid of intelligence, devoid of targeting facility, and devoid of command and control. Because if you don't have the communication, there's no command and control, and the command and control had to be manual. And imagine carrying the VHF radio sets, which have got huge amount of screening, and you are from Armored Corps, and you would realize that you can't depend on the line of sight communication. And line of sight communication means that if you have any intervening feature, then the VHF doesn't work. You got to then have different systems like HF, which are more conventional, but very, very difficult in the hands of specialists. So ultimately, it is a SATCOM, which would have ensured that the command and control and information flows into the ops rooms. So I think I have given you the whole perspective through your example of Kargil operations as to how the military and the future warfare is shaping up.
Thank you. Now that you've given that, very recently, Operation Sindoor was an eye-opener to a lot of us who've been, writing about strategic affairs, military, military, whatever has been going on particularly between India, Pakistan, India, China, and I think those barely 4 days or 88 hours between 7th and 11th of May, whatever we undertook, which amounted to about um, um, hitting very accurately over 20 targets, 9 of them being um, terrorist strongholds or uh, camps or whatever, but large, substantially large buildings, and at least 11 airfields. Um, Later, there were reports that there could have been 18. There could have been no. There are 18 airfields that we hit, but 11 certainly. So over 21. Anyway, but the way we had targeted and the way we had been able to uh, deflect or neutralize the enemy targeting us, I think was a bit of an eye opener. If you can throw some light on that.
Colonel Bhatt, Op Sindoor is an example of many different uses of technology. I would take it back because a little bit of Op Sindoor background as to why and how we reached where we reached during Op Sindoor is extremely important to cover. You would recall that in the 1990s, anything we spoke before 1990s was more conventional. Strike corps and, huge amount of maneuver element that would be planned, and all that story would unfold, capturing territories, managing territories, and making sure that your defenses are also equally configured to handle that kind of a large maneuvers. What changed in 1990s was the advent of the space technology. DARPA brought in two things. One is the internet was growing at that time, so it made the forces also take internet for a network centricity. Actually, internet came out of the military requirement, and then later on it was adapted by the civilian by the civilian use. Secondly, DARPA also went down to get the PNT, which is the GPS, was the outcome of it. And in 1990s, if you really recall, all of a sudden the civilian networks and the military networks started working very differently. And also space started showing up. And then the proof of that was in the Gulf Wars, Gulf War I and Gulf War II. When anything gets used by the military, there is an equivalent of the civilian. So one is that the Americans were targeting in a very surgical manner during Gulf War I and II, their smart ammunitions and Patriot missiles, and everybody was talking about that they can actually put a missile through a window. Some of it was, of course, a media campaign, and the campaign run by the business of warfare for the military industrial complex to sell their equipment. That also starts building. The commercialization of military happens just along with that. So therefore, a lot of advertisement happens. And therefore, media war became a new way where every citizen of the country, or even globally, they could watch Gulf War sitting in their drawing rooms. In the 1990s, more and more commercialization happened, and India also went in to buy the services of the GPS. And when we bought the services of the GPS, at that time, it was also available commercially that you could go in not only for GPS services, but also for Earth observation. And you could also make sure that your communications could also be bought through services, which is commercial programs. But India very quickly understood the value of communication. So we launched our own GSATs. You remember that there was an INSAT program for our own satellites, and it came for development for use in agriculture. And then, IRS program came for Earth observation and all that. Well, all that was going on, but the resolution was not military. So what happened was that when we...
Please, if you could please elaborate INSAT and GSAT. This full form. That's all.
These are Indian satellites, which
Okay.
are on the geostationary orbit, where you take that orbit at 36,786 kilometers or something like that. And relatively, when they go into the orbit, it is stationary, it appears stationary on the equatorial plane. So it means that relatively, if there is a satellite or communication satellite in the geo, so it appears to be static. So all these were communication satellites which were static and also were depending on the band that they use, KU band and Ka band. I don't want to really get into that,
Yeah,
which
no,
could
that's right.
run your satellite operations for communication and television programs. And if you remember, earlier we used to have the antennas of Doordarshan pointing towards the Earth television antenna, those
Yes,
big towers. And then later
yes,
on, all of a sudden, all those directional tower antennas disappeared and the dish
they
antennas
disappear.
came up because they started pointing towards the space. And that is how the INSAT program came in. And once you do that, then you can communicate, and then the Earth observation starts off. And Earth observation is a little different cup of tea. I think over a period of time we will talk about it. So in Kargil, what happened was that
And
all
what
of a
about
sudden,
GSAT? GSAT is
GSAT is
geostationary,
communication. Yeah, it is meant for communication at the geo orbit, which is a stationary orbit, geostationary orbit.
geostationary orbit.
Geostationary orbit. As I said, 36,786 kilometers, which looks relatively stable, static on ground. You can always keep looking at the satellite. Technically, if you could, you will find the satellite always at the same place. And
Okay.
the satellite would, if you technically sat there, the transponder would continue to look at the area under it, one third of the Earth's surface it can cover in a static manner because it is moving in the same speed and same direction as the Earth movement.
We don't realize that where we are sitting, that the Earth is also moving at a very, very fast pace.
Yeah, Earth is moving. And then I think at that time, the satellite at that 36,786 kilometers moving at about 11,000 kilometers an hour. That is the speed of the satellite to match the speed of the Earth. Uh, so you want me
So
to
no,
delve more
now
into it?
I think now briefly, if you could tell us what the future, what we can expect in the future, because I think whatever happened in those 4 days in may not be the end of it. There certainly is going to be more, and there's no saying the Director General Military Operations after a few days corrected. He corrected us, saying that it's not two nations that we were fighting against. It was three. It was, Pakistan, China, and Turkey. So there's no saying to, you know. So I mean, we have to be prepared for at least maybe even better than what we were, how we performed. That's why, if you could uh, put us through to what we can expect in the future.
Kal, but since you spoke about Obsindur and the discussion is on space, so I will restrict it. Otherwise, we will go into a very
No, no,
large plane
no,
of discussion into the future technologies, which we can
no,
touch
fair
upon
enough.
a little later during our discussion.
Fair
Um,
enough.
Coming back to Kargil, because I need to give you a few benchmarks which are benchmarks of change. So all of a sudden, when we went to war, we realized that the GPS services of the United States had been denied to us. So that was a denial of service. And
Hmm.
then we realized that you cannot depend on a foreign satellite service and you have to do your own thing. So Kargil taught us the value of space in all the three triad understanding of it, the communication, the ISR, and the PNT. And the PNT was nothing but GPS. So we then decided after Kargil that we have to invest in our own PNT services, and we created our own NAVIC system over a period of time. And NAVIC system is a GPS which is regional, not global. and it means that you need to place certain number of satellites to make it global. But if you do lesser number of satellites on a certain orbital plane, then it can only give you a regional service. So we thought that initially we will go regional, and then later on it can be expanded towards global. So we have a regional satellite PNT service, which is called the IRNSS, which is Regional Navigation Satellite System. The growth then from Kargil onwards went on to acquiring our own ISR capability. So we invested in Cartosat and the RESAT. The Cartosat is more Earth observation, and RESAT is more into having the SAR capability, which is synthetic aperture radar. So it gives you all weather capability. The Earth observation, which is through the EO, electro optical, has a problem with weather. So it is a fair weather satellite, whereas the RESAT or the SAR imagery is all weather. So we then built our configurations both for fair weather and for bad weather. So RESAT and the Cartosat combination started giving us the Earth observation used for military, which is the ISR. We continue to then invest in the GSAT. So the first GSAT was given to the Navy. And because they had to navigate in the oceans, they had to communicate in the oceans. And the second one was given to the Air Force, and the third one would be given to the Army. At the moment, Army shares the satellite, communication satellite with the Air Force. So I have spoken about the three elements in the triad. That is, now we have the IRNSS, which is the NAVIC system of our own. We have the Cartosat RESAT series put together, which is our own ISR. And we have the GSAT series, GSAT 7 and 7A, which are our own military communication satellites. And we are developing many more, and the time would tell as to how we grow into. So Sindoor has also become a benchmark on how much we use this triad for targeting across, fighting a non-contact battle, but it was a non-contact but kinetic battle. And that is what actually what you saw in Sindoor. And the satellite imageries very quickly picked up certain targets which had been destroyed, and that is how in your drawing rooms and bedrooms people could see the imageries being shown on the television. Let me tell you, most of the imageries came from the American satellite called the Maxar. So a commercial satellite used for information, and information became information warfare, and information warfare became the narrative warfare. So what happened was that once the imagery starts getting into the television, then the statements or how you doctor that or how you interpret that and how you use that information to build a narrative became a narrative warfare. So really speaking, with space, you have the information, but you also have ability to have information warfare and also narrative warfare. I think this is the combine of what we have learned during Sindoor as well.
Thank you. And I think it, what was what occurred to us after Sindoor was that we worked, I think, over about at least 10 years, because that was a period when a lot of us used to be lamenting, oh, we don't have this, we should have this, it should. So, and there was a lot of, the government lines of Atmanirbharta, self-sufficient in all aspects. This operation proved that a lot has been achieved. That certainly should not make us complacent, because I'm very sure that there is still a lot to be done, and also in this operation, what we had achieved, it was almost like learning while we were using. Anything else you'd like to add?
Yes. So India has been on this path of indigenization very slowly, but I think now we have caught the attention of the government and of the ecosystem that both have to come together. Privatization becomes very important for indigenization because huge amount of money then gets spent by the private industry into the research and development and also in manufacturing. They can also do global business because today huge investments are required, and you can't only serve one country, you have to become global. So, therefore, if you really look at the MOD figures of export, you would know that Indian defense industry is not only providing for to the Indian armed forces, but is also now having
Oh,
a
yes,
huge
of
amount
course.
of
Of course.
global exports.
We're in
Now,
demand. We're
yeah,
in.
yeah. So we started developing our own launch capabilities, and not too many nations had launch capability.
Yes, yes.
So once we have a launch capability in space, so it is like a missile technology. That our missile technology, and you know the Prithvis and the Agnis and all that development which has happened from conventional warheads to nuclear warheads ability that we built in our surface to surface missiles. And once you have a missile system, then you can have surface to air missiles. And then you can continue to change it into any configuration. You can have the naval variant, you can have a ground variant, you can have an air variant. So you can have the air delivery missile, you can have a ground delivery missile, and you can have the naval delivery of missile. So we went into develop missile technology. So that also gave us a capability of standoff warfare. So when you talk about non-contact but kinetic, that comes under the understanding of a non-contact warfare or a standoff warfare. Standoff warfare, there is a huge role of industry in it. And in
Yes.
standoff warfare, the revolution has happened that the drone ecosystem and the autonomous technology has made standoff warfare more lethal business, that you don't have to really infiltrate, or you don't have to attack, but you can damage. You can actually do operations beyond borders without physically crossing the borders, including the aircrafts did not cross this time. And they were using technology and standoff warfare to make sure that through standoff and beyond visual ranges, certain targets, or most of the targets, or all of the targets, were being engaged during Op Sindoor. Another point that I wanted to make was that whenever you go into the network warfare or network centric warfare,
Net-centric warfare. Yeah.
yeah. So the moment you go to net centric warfare or network centric warfare, you are susceptible to cyber attacks. Because in the network, the supply chain infection, if you don't have your own systems and you find that chips are coming from outside, they're programmable or otherwise, the chips can actually bring in a lot of bugs, and backdoor problems can come up in the configurations. So the backdoor entries through bugs can be used for the cyber attack. So therefore our systems got to be protected from the cyber. So you would have realized that the cyber critical infrastructure has been given out a list, what all is part of the critical infrastructure or not. But unfortunately, at the moment, space is not part of the critical infrastructure, but space is susceptible to cyber attacks. Literally speaking, the modern day satellites are like flying computers. The Earth, uh, that is the terrestrial network, and the spatial networks, which are both non-terrestrial and terrestrial combined, have the ability of becoming one network. So therefore, if the cyber attack can be manifested on a ground station, it can also be manifested into a space asset of yours. And similarly, space can also be used for cyber attacks. So you would never know from where the cyber attack came. So, as part of the non-contact and non-kinetic warfare, there is a one big plane which has come up is neutralization through cyber attacks. So earlier we used to talk about the air campaigns. Now there will be cyber campaigns. And cyber campaigns are going to be manifested that you can destroy the entire critical infrastructure, bring the adversary down to its knees. Uh, Even without fighting a battle, you can win a battle or you can lose a battle if you haven't catered for that. But if you want to continue with your operations, with all the cyber attacks bringing the critical infrastructure down, now it becomes very easy for aggressor to go on to this territory to do whatever they want to do, because they will be enabled through the networks, but the adversary would have crippled under it. So when you say that DGMO made a statement that it is not two countries or three countries, it is a combination of countries. Space is one which can make you capable of fighting collaboratively anytime, because space assets or space as service and ground stations as service have put together a ability that you can actually ride on somebody else's assets very quickly. Like for example, Starlink came in very quickly to support Ukraine against Russia. So, how much time did Elon Musk take to rebuild the destroyed communications, terrestrial communications of Ukraine? Very quickly, they were replaced by the Starlink. And then the targeting of the Starlink started happening. So, it means they went into space warfare to bring down some of the Starlink satellites. Burnt reasons may not be attributed to attack, or it could be their own getting into the debris. So, these are the important things that you go into space warfare, which is another realm of discussion altogether.
Anyway, thank you very much, Col Pannu, for a very concentrated dose. Thank you.
Wish you all the best, sir. Thank you for getting me over to South Asia Monitor of Sam Talks.